Welcome to part 2 of our 3-part conversation with Dr. Jack Kruse. In today's episode, Dr. Kruse explains how we are growing type 1 diabetics in this country, why we need to rethink our use of sunscreen and LASIK eye surgery and how it's hurting us, and the steps we can take to start thinking like lions and hippos and all our fellow mammals to heal ourselves. All right, friends, we are back. Today we're talking about rewilding, going back to our roots as mammals. I know we're mammals, but we forget we're those kind of mammals. You know, the hippos and the lions and all the animals that go out and sit in the sun and do all the things that are natural and instinctive. And we're going the opposite way and getting some pretty rough results. So make like an animal, get ready, seatbelt in. Dr. Kruse is back with us. Enjoy. Can you explain to the audience who's never heard of centralized and decentralized what it exactly means?
Yeah. For example, centralized means there's one single controller. Okay. So for example, let's try to make it easy. The IRS is the centralized controller for your taxes. If you screw with them, they're going to screw with you. Mm-hmm. Okay. In circadian biology, it's light and dark. You have a coupled system. Light's not the most important part. Dark's not the most important part. They work together to control everything in your body. So in nature, if you look at all the decentralized networks in nature, like for example, a tree, photosynthesis, the way arteries form on the brain, the way energy is delivered in your body, everything is decentralized, meaning that there's no central controller.
The brain isn't the central controller?
No, it's not.
Oh, wow.
Not even close. And the interesting part of the story, the light and dark cycle control the brain. Got it? That's the big ticket.
Okay.
There's only 2 decentralized networks around. The natural one is nature. It runs quantum mechanically, which we established earlier. The other artificial one is Bitcoin. Bitcoin absolutely has no central controller. This is the reason why, as money fails, you'll see people want to buy Bitcoin. And what people don't realize is that people who are decentralized in their medicine should be decentralized in their finance, because guess what happens? As money gets sick, which all of us are experiencing now with inflation, you begin to go, why do all these crazy millennials are out there buying this Bitcoin? Why don't I understand it? It actually is exactly the same story of why patients don't understand why they got type 1 diabetes. Because guess what? Nobody is teaching you about decentralization. Because if the bank educated you on decentralization, why would you ever need a bank? Okay. Now I have another friend, Jack Dorsey, who used to be the CEO of Twitter. He happens to be the anti-Steve Jobs. He's been one of my patients for a long time. Technology was killing him. And what did he do? He became a black swan mitochondriac. He's got 9.
Will you explain to my audience, the Heal Squad, what a black swan mitochondriac is?
That's a person that puts mitochondrial DNA above RNA and DNA. It's a person that realized that light and dark cycles are the key to everything. And they optimize light, water, and magnetism so that all the decentralized networks in you, you become the most thermodynamically efficient mammal on the planet.
How do you do that?
Well, you do that by living a proper circadian life. So, for example, someone like me, I just told you that I've been breaking a lot of laws the last 5 or 6 years. So I lost a lot of weight a long time ago, and I've put some weight back on. The reason I had to do that is I've been fighting legal battles about centralization and decentralization, because, you know, doctors have been, how shall we say, being forced out of business. So we've had to make some business decisions. So I've had to do certain things. I've been spending $50,000 a month on lawyers for the last 5 years.
Wow.
To fight the battle that we're talking about right now. So when people tell me that it's too expensive to do what's right, they're talking to the wrong guy. Why? Because I believe when you know something's right, you don't bitch and moan about it. You fix it. You do it. So the reason I'm out here right now is to get my lever so long that I'm able to move the earth so I can change it. So people begin to understand that decentralization is the single most important thing that everybody should be caring about. The problem is you're never going to know about it until you get the meningioma. But guess what? The answer is always around you. But the problem is you have to realize that your frontal lobes are so dumbed down from all the things that the centralized corporations are selling you. It's designed to make you an obedient idiot. And that is the essence of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Dunning-Kruger effect is when you don't know what you don't know, and it turns out to be the single most important thing in anything. Okay? That's actually the problem with centralized medicine. That's actually the real problem with the doctors. And guess what? It's the real problem with your audience. See, everybody is suffering from this because the environmental toxin began right around 1989. Okay? It's been present really since 1874. But where did it get to be noticeable in humans? Probably around 89. There's about 13 or 14 offending agents on the list. I happen to ascribe to the electromagnetic pollution one more than any other. Now, are there other ones on there? Is that when the vaccine schedule changed? Yeah. Is that when sunblock became really popular? Is that when we started to see industrial use of pesticides like atrazine and glyphosate, things like that? All these things play a role. Is it also when big food really started to ramp up GMOs and all that? Yes, all those are on the list, okay? So I'm going to tell you on this podcast that when you do studies or you bring people on here and they talk about stuff, Jack Kruse is going to give you +1. But Jack Kruse does not believe anything comes close to the electromagnetic pollution story. Why? Because what did I tell you about
Light
us?
and dark.
It's light and dark cycle. And I try
And
to
our
tell
light cycle is
also,
avoided and our dark cycle is polluted.
well, think about the
right?
basics.
If you look outside at night, there's all lights. I'm having to change my whole light system out front because I'm trying to go to bed at night and I just see artificial light coming through the windows because we were lighting the property up for security reasons.
How about you just make it even simpler? Let's talk about Gavin Newsom. Why do you have daylight savings? I mean, you have to go even more idiot-proof than that. We do everything to screw this up. And we do it because we think we're saving energy. That was the original thing. Why do we have LED light bulbs? Why did the government just ban incandescents? Because we're saving energy because of this climate BS. Okay? And that's what it is, BS. You don't want to use LED bulbs, but now you're an American. You can't even buy a light bulb that is a good circadian bulb. Mm-hmm. So guess what's going to happen, Maria Menounos? 2, 3, 4, 5 decades. We are going to grow type 1 diabetics in this country. I mean, we used to have a type 2 diabetic. Now we're having a huge type 1 diabetic, especially since 89.
Interesting.
But what's happening in a place like, let's say, India? India for 5,000 years had a bunch of vegetarians that lived outside. All of a sudden, 30 years ago, big tech opened up call centers in India. Now, the largest group of type 2 diabetics, you know what they are? 170 million diabetics formed in 3 decades. That breaks Darwin's law. It breaks every other law. But you know what law it doesn't break? It doesn't break the law of heteroplasmy and transgenerational epigenetics. In other words, we know it's a mitochondrial change. We know what the toxin is.
Well, blue light raises glucose.
Right. It also raises the AMPK pathway. What else does it raise? Insulin. Well, guess what? You're a type 1. Type 1 doesn't make insulin. Okay? Why? Because the beta cells have totally burned out.
Quit.
But guess what? There's now data out there that I guarantee your endocrinologist doesn't know that you can actually turn a dead beta cell back on.
I'm talking to them every night.
Well, and that's what you need to do. But you need to talk to them with the light that does it.
And what's that light?
UV light.
So that's another thing I'm still trying to understand.
I just want to ask a question. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pose it
Go
here.
for it.
Maria Menounos needs to change. Like, you have all these lights here. How about you just change one out to UV and say another one out to red? You can leave all the rest of them.
Have a little red to offset.
Right, because guess what?
Yeah.
Try to mimic more of the sun in here, because I will tell you, I didn't bring my blue blockers because I thought we were going to do this outside.
I was, yeah.
And my eyes are driving me nuts here.
I know.
And I want you to, no, but it's not your fault. I want you to know the reason I'm telling this, you've got this problem. If you have to do your job and your job requires you to do this, it's incumbent upon you to realize
Yeah.
that you do control the lights in here. Yeah, I know you want to make it look good. I know your girl in there wants to make
No,
the
I
sound look
actually was
nice.
going to make this a healing studio. I bought those lights that mimic daylight, but
They're no good.
but they weren't good. And so I said, this isn't worth it.
No.
But I will do a UV light and I will do a red light. That's easy to do. And I limited my hours in here to 1 to 2 hours a week because I know how bad it is. And I'll tell you, I've been connecting a lot of dots, and I am wondering, all of the women that I'm friends with in this industry that are getting MS
Right.
and brain tumors and all these other illnesses, I'm like, we're in studios 15 hours a day as actors, as talent. I was too. And
You know, that's most of the reason why they're all addicted to drugs and things like that. I mean, I talked to Rick about that. You know, in his industry,
I just got chills.
it's a big issue. But what people don't understand, they don't understand the basic biology of the leptin melanocortin pathway. It controls everything. That is the power cable from your retina to everything else in your body. So where the defect is in the zip code, because your pancreas has its own zip code, then even in the pancreas, there's different zip codes because there's different cells there. I need people to understand that how light and dark is controlled is the key metric to everything else. You've got to get the light right. Now, here's the cool part. If you get the light right, that's Pareto's principle. 80% of your job as a black swan mitochondriac or a circadian believer, or as you say, the heal squad, guess what? You're going to do really well. Now, the problem is there's issues. Like, for example, the zip code that you're in, I don't know if you know this or not, but I've talked about a lot of
we have
podcasts.
145 5G towers just in my city.
Right. Well,
Do you guys want to bring in the blue light glasses for him? We have some for you.
It's
Courtesy of Dan Huber of Lucia Eyes, who brought us these blue light glasses.
Awesome.
Thank you, Dan.
So the big issue there, and I don't know if you know this, but I think it's important for your audience, especially for your friends. I have taught my members in the last 6 months something really unique. You can be naked here in California and get a tan and still have low vitamin D levels.
I know. My doctor is surprised. My vitamin D is off the charts. She's like, I don't know how you're absorbing it because LA is so bad.
Right. And the thing that you need to understand, the reason for that is you experience a different electromagnetic environment than everybody else out there. And so you're at a huge hamstrung effect when you live in a place like this. So doctors here they're beginning to wake up to this fact that patients can actually have a tan and have low vitamin D levels. What does that tell you? It tells you functionally they have no melanin inside their body. So that's the insides.
No melanin, cancer.
Right. Well, I wouldn't say cancer. I'm going to tell you most of the chronic Neolithic diseases are tied to the lack of melanin. In other words, they need melanin renovation inside. Generally, the way you do that is you renovate melanin on the outside and you suck it in and renovate it. But that's actually not able to do when you live in an environment where the electromagnetic pollution is off the chain. Why?
And when you say electromagnetic pollution, you're talking about 5G towers and lighting.
I want you to stop with the 5G.
Okay.
You are being myopic right now. 5G is a huge problem, but it's not even close to the big problem. I told you, 1 octave of the electromagnetic spectrum and the Schumann. Everything in between, including 5G, is a problem. And it turns out, believe it or not, and I don't know if you know this, the NTP toxicity study that was done by the United States government, it was released on November 1st, 2018. They did it on nocturnal mammals. They used 1G, 2G, and 3G phones. Okay? This is way before 5G. In those animals, they found humongous problems. You can look this study up on the internet. Now, is 4G a problem? Is 5G a problem? Yes. But realize every G causes a different resonance problem. Like 1G isn't equivalent to 5. 4 isn't equivalent to 5.
And you mean like different tuning fork issue?
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly right. And you have to realize that certain people...
Which will then throw different things off in your body.
Right, because certain people have different mitochondrial haplotypes. We also have different skin types. Like your skin type is more probably Mediterranean. I come from the 59th latitude, but I also spend most of my time now in the tropics. I only come home when I have to do trauma call to pay the lawyers off. I'm not doing things the way I used to do it anymore, but I'm trying to get control of my life back because the centralized system has been trying to shut me up for 5 years. They don't like this inconvenient truth. Why? Because remember, the people that are centralized, that's Big Pharma, the FCC, all the captured agencies. How about Motorola? How about Nokia? How about Apple? They're all part of this problem. Meta, Google, a big one. That's why every single screen, have you ever stopped and asked yourself why we need Dan Huber's glasses? Because they have found through the programs that the government sponsored, at Tulane Neurosurgery and Neurology, it's called MK Ultra, that they were able to control people through light waves. How did they first start this? They used to cut monkeys' heads off, okay? Put wires in their head to figure out how they can control the behavior of monkeys. That's actually was done in a place close to where I went to medical school. I knew about all of these studies.
So we can be controlled by light waves?
No, not we can. We are.
We are.
Okay? Update your knowledge base. So realize now you begin to notice why Dell, Apple, Meta, Google, everybody uses blue light. Why does every computer have a blue light screen? Why doesn't it come pre-loaded with Flux or Iris? Well, there's a reason for that. Do you know what the reason is? Because the blue light lowers your dopamine and melatonin level so that you become addicted. Who got that information first? Was it the CIA through the MK Ultra program? No, it wasn't. It was the mafia. You know how they got it? It's how they build Las Vegas. They put a city in a desert, in a geopathic stress zone, has shitty water, shitty magnetism, but great light. And then what they do, they put casinos out there, blocked all the light, and put one-armed bandits in there that made nothing but blue light. You know what the mafia found out by doing that? They didn't have to use a gun to stick you up to steal your money. Then they got even smarter. Then they started getting really pretty girls deliver you alcohol drinks for free. So with the blue light and the alcohol, your dopamine levels fell sooner. You gave them your money faster. That's how this began. And guess what? When the guys in the CIA saw this, they turned around to their scientists and said, hey, can we somehow stop putting the wires in the monkey's head and maybe think about how to do this differently? Because you know that wires in the head deliver electricity, brain works on a DC electric current. That should mean that it must work on light at some level. Well, along comes the people in Silicon Valley in the 50s and 60s, and we get semiconductors. What do we know about semiconductors? When you put electric into it, it makes what? LED. What does LED stand for? A light emitting diode. That's kind of interesting. So when you see the science developing all at the same time, and you realize the criminals were smarter than the centralized doctors. Didn't I tell you that story about the Colombian drug cartel? Isn't this funny how the same thing is happening again? So MK Ultra then decided to hire this guy named Delgado, who is a PhD researcher. He went down to Mexico, where you took your mom, and he put the wires directly into the bull's head and put the guy in there, and they had a remote controller, and they stopped the bull right away from running in to the guy electrically. So then the next part of the experiment was
without electrocution, just electric.
Oh no, you're not going to get electrocuted. It's just electricity. Yeah. You modulate the frequency. Look, it's just like Lutron shades you have in your house. You turn it up and down, the light goes up and down. Same thing with these controllers. So the next step in their program was let's get rid of the wires. Let's just put a microchip that's a semiconductor in the brain, kind of like Elon Musk is doing right now with Neuralink, right? Scary, huh? And what do? They were able to control electrically, photoelectrically, wirelessly. So then what did they next do? They said, could we use light to do the same thing? And guess what they magically found? That when you use light, you can control mammals. And guess who codified that? Meta and Google, through their patent attorneys. They own all the patents for blue light technology through screens. So then ask yourself, Maria Menudos, who lives in Los Angeles, who has a bunch of friends that work around these screens, do you think that potentially that all of these things have been used to control different things around you and doing different things? The answer is yes. Why is digital babysitting so successful for parents? Because the baby becomes much easier to control. Have you ever tried to take an iPad away from a 2-year-old that's already addicted to it? This is exactly the same situation as a heroin addict who needs heroin. Why? Because remember that Pomsey thing? One of the things I told you and Rick about? One of the things that cleaves to beta endorphin. What is beta endorphin? The natural opiate that your brain makes. So guess what? When you're around this electromagnetic pollution, you lose that beta endorphin. So you need an exogenous hit from dopamine or from drugs or from alcohol or from sex or from whatever you're addicted to, food, you name it. That's how this works. This all came from this study. But I want you to know it graduated from covert work done at institutions like Tulane, at Johns Hopkins, at the Mayo Clinic, at Harvard University. Then it jumped into big tech. Okay? You're too young to remember what it was like, what AOL dial-up was, and what the internet was in the beginning. Remember. I'm going to tell you what happened. Everything, remember the old screens? We didn't use those screens that used to play those stupid video games. Now they became blue lit. And guess who owns all those patents? The guys that control the algorithms. Oh, didn't I mention algorithms to you about centralized medicine? So let me ask you a question. Do you make more or less money when you have obedient idiots as your target audience? There's your answer. So guess what? You need to understand.
Also, let me enter for 1 second. Mm-hmm. These doctors are also in those environments with
and that's
the
why
blue light,
and that's why they're killing themselves
and the
at
lights.
Record rates.
Yeah.
You know, when I was at the first doctor, doctors never killed themselves. We always used to laugh at the dentist.
Number one suicide rate, right?
Well, no, they were getting burned out really fast. You know why? Because when I was a doctor, we used to use paper charts. Now we have to use Epic, Cerner, Meditech. Why? All blue lit screens. Now doctors have to sit down and input data instead of sit down and talking to you. Do you understand who that serves? It doesn't serve the patient or it doesn't serve the doctor.
Like that's my thing is they don't even know.
No, I promise you, doctors hate electronic medical records. They know about it. They don't realize that they're destroying their dopamine level. They don't realize that's why they're burning out. But here's the real problem. You don't realize why your doctor's burning out. See, what was the big lie that big tech sold to big medicine? That if we introduce technology like we have to every other place that will save money and decrease cost. Maria Menounos, has that happened? No, in fact, it's gotten worse. And here's what you need to understand. It's allowed them to collect big data. And big data they sell. And they make more money. And guess what? They figure out how to do this. Now, the next big lie is AI. They're going to use AI to actually train a computer to replace your dermatologist. These doctors that are not helping you right now, you're not going to see them soon. In the next 20 years, you'll go into Walgreens and you will sit down with a computer who will give you AI-generated centralized medicine that is created by Google algorithms. And that's how things are going to work. And if
I believe that
the power base that's in Washington, D.C. right now, you'll pay for it with a central bank digital coin because the money will have already blown up. And that, if you are not a good little obedient idiot in this dystopian world, they will turn off your central bank digital coin so that you can't go take your children to go get an ice cream, or you can't take your children to the beach, or you're not getting as much gas this time. And just so you know, people in the United States think that this isn't happening. This is the reason why during COVID, they didn't want you to use money. They wanted you to use a debit card. They are preconditioning what is coming to you. Okay? Technology isn't your friend. You need to learn how to use it and use it properly. But just remember, the owner's manual that you come with as a mammal, you are an electromagnetic being. Okay? And you need to learn about that before you actually need the doctor. So that when you do need the doctor, you can separate the via negativa, the superfluous, from the absolute bullshit, and then the partial truths. Because what do doctors really deliver in a centralized paradigm? Half-truths. What do I teach my members? Half-truths always lead to full lies. Full lies always lead to a prescription, and a prescription always leads to happy Pfizer and Merck. Okay, that is how the system is built. And they want you to live 80 years around the planet doing the same shit over and over again without ever questioning how the system does this. It's exactly the same thing that the mafia figured out in the casino. It's a cartel. And you have to stop. You have to stop treating them like they deserve your trust. You can't trust anyone. Okay? That's what this comes down to. Decentralized medicine is a trustless situation. The reason why? If you're doing everything decentralized, you don't have to worry about it. As I said to you when we started this podcast, I don't have to teach lions and hippos in Africa what I have to teach Maria Menounos. Why? They don't have two frontal lobes that allow them to break the laws of nature. In fact, they're smart enough to know to go under the tree when they get too much sun. They know exactly when it's time to drink water. The problem is people in LA don't even realize the water they're drinking from the CAP program is part and parcel of their problem.
The what program?
The CAP program, the Colorado River. You guys are stealing water from someone else. Everybody in Southern California is. And you don't realize that that water you're getting, heavily polluted with natural fluoridation. Not the stuff that they're adding, because they're adding more. That part of the world is loaded with natural fluoride. So you got to ask yourself, if you cannot control the thermodynamic givens in your environment, let me ask you something. Why in the hell are you living there? See, that is the hard problem of decentralized medicine. When you sit down with me, you're going to pay me money, but I'm going to tell you the truth, and you're not going to like the truth. You're not going to realize you taking your mother to Mexico was smart, but not for the reasons you thought. I get it. I know why you're frustrated, but I want you to know that you are living in a medical casino, and it's the puppeteer is the industrial military complex that supports big pharma. Why does this all happen? Very simply, they are trying to rehypothecate money in the medical system so that they can run the wars they want to run. And guess what? We're all complicit in the program. We all allow them to do what they do. Do you know why? I'll give you a perfect example. How long has Nancy Pelosi been in Congress? How long has Joe Biden been in Congress? We have 80-year-olds who are drooling on themselves. If you don't have term limits, and we're supposed to have term limits, it's called voting. Most people in the United States don't even get out and vote. You would think what we just went through with COVID would have woken up so many different people that we were told to trust the science, the centralized controller in that, Anthony Fauci. How'd that work out for everybody? How'd that work out for Damar Hamlin for the Buffalo Bills? How'd that work out for J.J. Watt? How to retire, Hall of Fame career. Because his heart started acting funny. Gee, I wonder why that happened. How many people were compliant with the centralized mandates and then wound up with myocarditis, which all the centralized doctors that you're trusting said couldn't happen? Why is it literally 8 weeks ago, a guy named Kevin McKernan, who worked on the Human Genome Project, who now works in the cannabis industry, this guy's a pristine molecular biologist. He decided to go get Pfizer vials that were expired and just test them. And he tested them. He found DNA plasmids and found SV40 in the vaccine that they told us that it couldn't be in.
What's SV40?
That's simian virus number 40 that showed up in the polio virus 75 years ago. Never ask yourself why it would show up in this one. What if I told you the same mistake that was made with the polio vaccine is now being made with this one? That's called the Cutter incident. All your audience members can go look it up. But you don't know about this. But guess what? I'm a doctor, and I know about it. And I told my members, Dan happens to be one, told them 3 years ago, if you roll your sleeve up and take this jab, you are setting yourself up for a cadre of problems. So guess what I'm teaching you right now? You pay me to really learn how to think.
Mm-hmm.
So let's finish the story of Kevin McKiernan. He was vilified on medical Twitter by the people in the centralized paradigm. So finally, another person who has his same skill set that works in academic medicine at the University of South Carolina named Philip Buchholz decides, I want to shut this guy up once and for all. There's no way this could be in there. He takes the same vials from the same set, tests it, and guess what he finds? He wasn't lying. It's the truth. History often repeats itself when you don't fix the problem. In fact, science has gotten more centralized from the Cutter event than not. And it really got centralized in vaccine data. Why? Because now Big Pharma has liability.
You said there was a vaccine incident somewhere in the 80s. What was that?
Well, there was several of them, but the big one was the polio vaccine. Maria, have you ever asked yourself this single question? Why did Jonas Salk never win a Nobel Prize for discovering the polio vaccine? Do you know why? Because it didn't work. And actually, all his vaccines were polluted with SV40. Do you know why Nixon started the war on cancer? Because SV40 causes cancer. And guess what? The government has known this for a really long time. In fact, most of the soft tissue cancers, most of the cancers that you got and your mom got, I guarantee if you went and got genetic tested right now that you'd be positive for SV40. Bet you didn't know that.
Is there a way to reverse SV40 in your system?
Let me tell you something. That podcast I just did with RFK, you're going to be very, very interested in that. I'm going to tell you, did the people that caused the Cutter event try to do that? Oh, yeah. And you should see the collateral effects of that.
My chest is getting so heavy.
Well, the reason I'm telling you this, remember what I said to you. Question everything. The things that even you think are a good idea. Like, for example, you have a headache, you want to take aspirin. I'm not going to tell you that's a bad idea, but I'm going to even tell you I want you to question that. When the doctor tells your mom, who's 65 years old, to take aspirin every day, it's evidence-based. It's not. It's actually not.
The baby aspirin for the heart?
It's not. There's no good evidence that aspirin after age 65 works in women. There's minuscule evidence that it works in men. But guess what? Everybody does it. Just because everybody doesn't mean you should do it. See, it's okay to let the lemmings do what they do. But if you decide that you want to be decentralized, you are going to learn how to really think like a lion and a hippo. See, when a lion and a hippo get a headache because they're banging heads and fighting, they just go sit down in the sun. That's what they do. And they recover. They regenerate. They don't reach for a pharmaceutical product so that they can come back, so they can go to Starbucks to meet their girlfriend to go buy a Louis Vuitton purse. See, that's the wrong answer. But guess what? Modern humans are addicted to their wants, needs, and desires, and not the fabric. We think we are the mammal that is divorced from evolution, and we are not. We are still tethered to the same tendrils that your little puppy is. And if you don't believe me, I hope some of your listeners go and put the sun on and put a time-lapse photography on your cats and dogs.
They
and
go
you know
out
what you
to
do?
the sun
They go
all
right to
the
the sun.
time.
But even remember, you're killing these animals by keeping them inside.
Yeah.
But even they know to go to the sun. And guess what? I don't speak dog or cat. I don't tell them to do this. But you know what I do, Maria Menounos? I pay attention. I know what dogs and kitties do. I know what animals do. And what do I tell my patient? I want you to rewild yourself. I want you to become something that you're not right now, because all of us are zoo animals. And look, this is offensive to people. They really don't like this message. But you know what I'll tell you is...
Which part of it? Going into the sun or becoming like zoo animals?
Well, both, because guess what? When they go into the sun and they have a tan or they have a sunburn, like I do right now, the dermatologist is going to tell them that they're an idiot.
So a sunburn is not bad?
No, of course not. But
I'll tell you, when Dr. Allison put me on the sun diet, I was scared, but I had to trust because I knew what I was doing wasn't working. So I said, let me try this. I was afraid of all the brown spots and all of that. I actually...
This actually causes the brown spots.
And heat. will cause brown spots,
Well,
but the sun is not doing it.
Infrared B and C does, but not infrared A. See, UV and infrared A light get rid of the brown spots. You know what the brown spots are? Brown spots are the melanin coming from inside your brain to the skin because it can't find UV light.
See, Natasha, I was telling you this the other day because I said, Natasha, start working outside. And she's like, I can't, my skin, I'm going to get brown spots. I said, no, I have less brown spots now that I've been in the sun and I'm baking.
So this podcast isn't for her because she thinks being like a vampire is good and healthy because guess what? She's bought the narrative from the dermatologist. But why does the dermatologist have that narrative? Because if they can keep you devoid of melanin in your skin, you will be a great customer for them for the rest of your life.
Yeah. But by the way, Natasha's now hearing this from you. And Natasha, you tell me, I think you're going to have a different opinion of this now. And I know everyone listening from the Heal Squad is going to too.
I don't know if I believe that. I think when she gets the melanoma, that's what'll wake her up.
So
because
now,
then she'll say,
can we talk about melanoma? Because people think, I loved when I read this. So people think melanoma comes from the sun.
But why
and
did they
everyone
think
with melanoma has no vitamin D. So how would they have gotten it because of too much vitamin D?
Well, see, Maria Menounos, you're asking the right questions. But when you go into the dermatologist, it's like the end of the cartoon when they go, bidee, 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 that's all, folks. The data that they have in their literature shows everybody who gets any type of skin cancer has the lowest levels of vitamin D. So immediately, if you're a decentralized audience member, you have to say, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. So what actually is the real cause of most of the melanomas? Now, artificial light. So remember I told you the story before when drug addicts break in to the Walgreens pharmacy to get the OxyContin? I want everybody after they listen to this podcast to go into a Walgreens or a CVS and look where the sunscreen is in relation to the pharmacy. You're going to find that it's always prominent right by the pharmacy. And they never lock it up. They're hoping that the guy that comes in and steals that goes and steals that and sells it on the street out of his car in LA because they want you to use it. They want you to use it as much as you can. The more you block melanin in your skin, the more white you get like Natasha, you are coming to see the dermatologist. You are going to have huge problems, and those problems are going to get greater and greater and greater. Then they're going to say, oh, look, you got this cut off, you got that cut off. But they never, ever, ever check your vitamin D level because technically, if the sun is toxic, everybody's vitamin D should be, 150 to 200. You know what you find? It's exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, sunscreen has so many toxic components to it. So now your skin is your largest organ. It's seeping through. And if you don't believe that, when you're doing, gender changes, people use the estrogen patches for that because it goes through your skin. But I'll tell you, I just had a moment because my dad is 79, type 1 diabetic for over 50 years, but he's always outside in the sun. And these doctors at MIT wanted to study him because they couldn't believe he has no side effects of the diabetes.
Well, I can tell you the reason why, because guess what? When you're in the sun and you're type 1 diabetic, and most diabetics know this implicitly, you use less insulin. Do you know why? The sun is a calcium channel blocker. So what does it do? It actually lowers your blood glucose. So
I wish that was the case for me right now because I'm using more insulin than...
Well, I can tell you the reason why after visiting you.
But I'm not in here very much.
Well, I got news for you. You still don't get it, Maria Menounos. Yeah. You live in freaking LA.
I know.
Okay, you need to come see me in El Salvador.
I'm coming.
I know, but you need to stay there.
I want to buy a place there.
Well, but that doesn't mean you're going to stay there. A lot of people have places, but they don't stay there.
No, I
just need to come here.
I need to be alive for my baby. So I don't care about living here anymore. I've been wanting to leave. I just didn't know where I was going. Well, but I'll say everyone can't leave to El Salvador. And that's my thing.
They can.
How do they?
Absolutely, they can.
The whole world can't live in El Salvador, Dr. Jack Kruse.
No, but I'm not saying El Salvador, but in between the
everyone
20s,
going to Central America?
Well, in between the 20s, there's a big world out there. See, how do you change centralized paradigms? When people start moving out of San Francisco, LA, and New York, which is happening now, guess what? All of a sudden, that's when the centralized controllers are going, something's wrong here. When the malls start closing, that's a sign. Like, this is what I told you about voting. It's the same thing. You vote when you're a consumer. You should know that. You're in this industry. I can tell you that 20 years ago, I wasn't a really popular guy. I'm kind of popular right now. COVID was, how shall I say, the spark that started to wake up some of the sleeping idiots that are watching us. And I said that on purpose to offend them, because I have a different belief than my friend Dan in there, because I know you already talked to him. He believes spreading the love helps things. As a neurosurgeon for 30 years, the best thing to change people is when they get smacked in the face. Why? You would be stunned when someone comes into me with a GBM. They will do whatever it takes to get time.
Yep.
You know that because you had a mom with it.
I've been in that situation too
Guess
many
what?
times.
But I can't get anybody to do that when they just put the stupid Apple ear pods in. And I tell them, dude, you're going to wind up with a dedifferentiated cancer, an oligodendroglioma that's going to go to grade 4. And they don't believe me. And I just show them all the papers. I said, you don't have to believe me. Here you go. But you know what they say? Well, that happened to that dude. It ain't going to happen to me.
Or even I was hearing you talk about LASIK surgery, cutting off what is it, the retina that it's not the retina it's cutting off, but it's cutting off.
Well, go back to the MK Ultra story that I told you. If light controls things in our brain, doesn't that mean that any of the refractive things in our eyes, if we change that, doesn't that change the light frequencies?
Yeah.
There's your answer.
Yeah.
So there's a famous
contact lenses, sunglasses,
terrible.
LASIK surgery. My mom had LASIK surgery, and I wondered if that was one of the big reasons for her GBM.
Of course it is. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Now, can I prove it definitively? No, but do I know the science of the non-visual photoreceptor system in the eye and the brain? Yeah, I do. But let me tell you the story that you need to hear. I want to punch you in the mouth with this. There's you can look this up. You can Google it. I don't remember her name. She was 2017, 2018 weather forecaster from Detroit. Very nice lady. 4 children, all pretty young. She's pretty. Blue eyes, blonde hair. She got LASIK surgery and got immediately depressed. Like it happened very, very quickly. She got so depressed that she killed herself. And the reason I always like to tell this story is people think that depression, and this takes, years to come on and this and that. No, light frequencies can make you suicidal right away. And that is the story that was based in MK Ultra. That's what the CIA, that's what Google knows, that's what the mafia knows. Everybody knows that light is capable of doing this. So you need to understand the reason for that. In your cornea, which is what the LASIK surgery is, you have a non-visual photoreceptor called neuropsin. Okay. Neuropsin is a UVA detector. That's UVA light. UVA light's one of the lights that turns on melanin, turns on POMC. It also makes nitric oxide. Okay. But the key mechanism of how this lady went to where she went, she decided to get LASIK because of her job, because it was inconvenient for her to wear glasses on TV. You know that deal better than me.
That's why I love doing my own thing.
And then here's the second thing. When she put the contacts in, it didn't seem to help her very much. So she's like, I just want to get rid of the contacts. I'm just going to do LASIK. Why? Because she never thought about the possibilities that this could cause a big issue.
How would we know? It's been normalized. I did it for my mom. I took her.
Well,
I didn't know. I was 23 years old. My mom didn't want to wear her glasses anymore. They were scarring her nose, so I took her.
But do you understand what you just said? You believe the propaganda of the centralized system.
Yep.
How do you do that? You question everything. Again, we come back to the thing that I sell.
And shame on me. As a journalist, I didn't.
Right, because you could look into this and now you know about it. But what I want you to understand, anything that changes the frequencies through your skin or your eyes is a deal breaker.
Which is, by the way, why blue light glasses aren't enough, because we're still getting blue light to our skin.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that toxicity, and it's going through our clothes too.
Well, it depends on the clothes, but the big thing is we learned in 2017 that melanopsin, which is the blue light detector, is in our skin, it's in our arteries, and it's our brain. In fact, I told Huberman on Rick's podcast, back when it came out, and he was stunned about this. The number one opsin in the human brain is melanopsin. It's a blue light detector. And the reason why this stunned, the centralized scientists back in 2005, 2006, is because they're like, wait a minute, this is a blue light detector that comes from amphibians. Why in the hell is it in a human brain? In fact, you even heard Huberman say that on the podcast. And I sat back and chuckled. And I'm going to tell you the reason why I chuckled. This is important for you to hear because I want you to understand Huberman's a good guy. He works in a centralized place. He's a centralized guy. He believes in centralized science. But I want to show you and your audience why you have to question everything. This is a guy that works on cephalopods and didn't know that amphibians is where mammals came from 300 million years ago. So why wouldn't melanopsin be in the human brain? Because guess what? Mammals
We came from them.
later, right? But that's what I'm trying to tell you. This is a cornerstone basic idea that I learned when I was 6 years old walking around the Museum of Natural History. And the reason I highlight this, Maria, is not to make fun of Andrew. I think he's a good guy. What I'm trying to tell you is that's why science is broken. And that's the reason why your audience has to question even the foundations. Because there are so many things that are called evidence-based that are masquerading as truths. And guess what? The Heal Squad needs to employ via negativity. That's look for the superfluous and subtract it. And you're going to find, if you listen to me, if you do a good job yourself, you're not going to need doctors. And guess what? That's the real pointy needle of my arrow that I'm shooting at centralized medicine. I'm actually teaching people how to eliminate me. Now realize how unusual that makes me. And the reason is because I took my oath serious. I became a doctor because I'm fascinated by the human body. I have to tell you, this journey that I've been on for 60 years, this is the greatest journey ever. Why? Because the things that I've learned, the things that I had to unlearn to relearn, every single day of my life, I learned something new that I just sit back in my chair and go, nature is incredible. I mean, the owner's manual that we have, if we just spent, 50% of the NIH budget studying nature and studying mitochondrial DNA, I really believe that literally in 10 years, when your daughter is a teenager, the world can be a totally different place. But you want to know what the key metric is? I need the people listening to this podcast, you out there, to stop being compliant with their bullshit. That's the truth.
So how does the overwhelmed Heal Squad member right now, who's hearing all of this for the first time, because the truth is, we haven't heard these things before. We didn't know we were in a system that was paid for by the pharmaceutical companies. We might have had ideas or thoughts. So how do we get back to nature every day? How do we unwind what we've done? You talk about circadian biology. I'd love to share exactly what that means. I know you say never miss a sunrise. So I want to give them some action steps on how to heal properly.
It's the simplest thing ever. Go to YouTube and open up the migration of the wildebeest as they go. They have to go through the Nile River and get eaten by crocodiles. That's actually what nature requires you to do. You have to be outside all the time. Now, that's a really inconvenient truth because guess what? Most of us have a job. But you need to realize your job actually is one of the big problems. Then you're going to realize the makeup you wear is a problem.
Yep.
Then you're going to realize, the
makeup because it's toxic, or the makeup in general because you're covering your
makeup
pores.
Because it's toxic and also it blocks light frequencies. There's a lot of reasons. I'm not going to give them all to you.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say to you is the answer is staring you right in the face. Go look at a wild animal. Like, here's the beauty of the internet. You don't even need to go to Africa anymore to see what they do. But realize that they don't get the diseases we get. The only animals that get the diseases we get are the ones that are in the zoo or the ones that are your pet. I mean, veterinarians love this. They're printing money. But that's...
So if you work indoors, like you were saying, you need a UV light and a red light to help offset.
Right. But that's just...
something.
That's something. Better than this. I mean, look, I told you, give me some glasses because sitting here is...
It's exhausting when you don't have them.
Well, it's not only it's exhausting, I got to be honest with you, it's hurting my eyes. But I'm also exquisitely sensitive to blue light because I block it all the time. And I tend not to do things inside. I'm usually outside. I told you, I was just outside for 3 hours. You can see I got a nice little, pinkish tone to me. But the point that I want to make to people is it's not that hard. You are a mammal. You are a human, but you are a mammal first. Mammals are the dominant animal on this planet. You're the only mammal that comes out of its mother thinking it's wise to wear sunglasses and clothes. Then makeup. Then, creams, sun creams. Why do you believe that? You believe it because you were told that.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what? I want you to begin to question everything. It's not that hard. And then realize the bigger abuser you are of the electromagnetic spectrum, then you need to do more. So here's the easiest part. The easiest part is there are now books. Like when I started this, Maria, 20 years ago, there was no books out about this. So if you want to learn, say, about the water chemistry in the body, like we talked about earlier, go buy the book, Defeating Cancer, Gabor Somali, read it. You want to learn more about water, more fundamental, like for a third grader? Gerald Pollack wrote a book. It's called Fourth Phase of Water. A third grader could understand this. You learn things about water in that book you won't believe, okay? Then if you want to learn about how we make endogenous light stronger than the sun, yes, I know some of you are going to think that's kind of crazy.
Cold thermogenesis, right?
Well, yes, but there's a book, Roland Van Wyck, Light Sculpting Life. You can go to that. If you want to learn about how the enzymes in your body do the things they do, there's a book on that now too. It's called Life on the Edge by Jim L. Khalili. In other words, there's now books being published. You want to be a black swan mitochondriac, go read Nick Lane's books. He's got a whole bunch of them, but the best one is called Power, Sex, and Suicide. You'll learn about how all those things link. It's a very provocative title, but it's provocative because he's going to teach you some things. If you want to really become a black swan, all you have to do then is go on the internet and listen to Doug Wallace. He's the PhD researcher that taught us everything about mitochondria. He's never been funded because he's not a friend of Anthony Fauci. He works at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Someone like you who has your problems, you have a duty to actually have Doug on this show, and you probably need to read everything he's ever written, and you need to watch every video.
Done.
The reason why is because you have a little pup now. That little pup is coming from a family that clearly has a mitochondrial problem, based on what you've shared just with me in this time. I think that's first and foremost. I think if knowing your history, see, I want the audience to understand this. Knowing what you shared with me, knowing that you have a new baby, I think LA is absolutely the worst decision you can ever make. But realize that if you didn't have any of those problems, saying you live in LA, that doesn't mean that Uncle Jack is going to tell you that you need to move. That means that you may have pretty good mitochondria, your heteroplasmy is low, and you're making enough melanin. See, everybody thinks because Maria Menudo's got this problem that I'm going to get it. No, you remember, no one is the same. Not even an identical twin.
That's why it's an art.
All right. And you have to realize that people don't understand this. And the proof of the concept about the identical twin happened with the Kelly brothers. Remember, one went up in space, one stayed down. The guy that went up in space, his whole genome was jacked. Why? Because he was up outside the protection of the magnetosphere. He got the full power of the solar wind, which is an EMF, and it totally hypermethylated his DNA. That's why when you saw him come down, he couldn't even move. Read his autobiography. He tells you in there he was a train wreck after 340 days in space. Guess what? You don't realize you're a train wreck for living 340 days in LA compared to, say, El Salvador. Or how about Destin, Florida? How about New Orleans? See, the population density of the city you live in is a problem. It's the same idea that I gave you before about the plane flight. You're in a metal tube with 300 idiots on the internet. Okay, it's a small space. That's how the electromagnetic spectrum works. It's called the inverse square law. The closer you are to the point source, try to make this easier. Would you put your head in a microwave oven? Would you put your junk in front of an x-ray machine?
Nope.
Okay, you get that. But you don't realize that if you live closer to a tower that's used by 2 million people in Malibu, you're the idiot. You're the one that is making the decision. So that means you can't live in a place that has 14 million people in it. So, I'm from New York. You'll never catch me there. I told Rick, a year ago that I'd never come back to LA. And I'm here for the second time.
I was surprised.
Well, what I'm doing here.
Yeah. It's like a small sacrifice for the bigger picture. You don't do it a lot,
Well, no, I'm
right?
going to tell you it's a big sacrifice. Remember, I'm 60 years old. My heteroplasmy rate's going up. I have a duty to get this science to the people that Huberman are teaching at Stanford University. If I can change one doctor, they will affect 1,000 audience members that are going to watch this. See, your audience members want to know who are the other doctors out there that are doing what Jack's doing. You know, you have your naturopathic doctor in Connecticut, but realize what we need to do, Marina. We need to create more decentralized medicine clinicians. And the only way we're going to do that is sometimes you have to put the target on your back. And I'm doing that. That's why I've flown back. I'm supposed to be on a luxury vacation now in the middle of an ocean. My family is there right now. I got off a cruise ship to come here to do what I did earlier today and to do what I'm doing right now. Why? It's that important. That important. And I appreciate you giving me time, because I thought when I came back to do what I did earlier today that Huberman was going to have me on his podcast. He didn't have time for me. Why? Guess why? Because the inconvenient truths that occurred in March kind of pissed off the powers that be, in the centralized ivory tower. But Maria Menounos isn't tied to that process. In fact, Maria Menounos is starting to question a lot of those things. See, to me, that's the beautiful thing. And then when, Dan tells me, yeah, this Maria Menounos girl, she's big into blocking the blue light and this and that. I'm going, but wait a minute. She works in Hollywood. She's in industry. I'm going, that means she's a salmon. She's starting to swim upstream. She's starting to break convention. If you want to know the real reason, Maria, that I came in here, I was more intrigued about you than you were probably intrigued about me. Why? Because with your story, with your history, I want you to know there's something even bigger and deeper there. I didn't know you had a baby. Now that I know you got a baby, I'm like, this really isn't about Jack Kruse affecting Maria Menounos. I'm more interested in that baby than probably you. And that's a really messed up thing to say in your show, but it's the truth. Why? Because that baby may turn in to the next scientist that really changes the world. And I need more of them. I need Mama Bear Maria to realize that she needs to protect that baby until that baby can make its own informed consent. Mm-hmm. And I've got this funny feeling that Maria is now going to teach her daughter the value of decentralized thinking. Like, you're going to begin to realize the number one prescription that decentralized mammals deliver to their children is the ability to think. You're going to reject AI. You're going to reject anybody doing your thinking for you. You're not going to want an algorithm. When, this
Natasha, is how... Are you laughing right now?
This is how bad I am.
About AI. She knows.
Do you know when I go into Home Depot or Walmart for any reason? Because I've been doing that a lot because I bought a new house in El Salvador. I won't even go to the aisle where they want me to do the barcode. I will wait there until they have a person to code it in, and then I always pay in cash. And do you know why I do that? To piss off the centralized system. I want to punch them back in their mouth. I don't comply. Look at my Twitter feed. What does the thing say? Do not comply. When they tell you to use a credit card, you use cash. When the bank says they don't have enough cash, say, what time do I need to come back to get my cash? Okay? When the bankers start to tell you, we're going to switch all this to a central bank digital coin, you go to the voting box and you say, no, thank you. You need to realize you are a free, wilded mammal. That's what you came in on this planet for. Do not settle for less than you deserve. Because when you start settling for B, C's, and D's, you are going to pay biologic tolls. Only settle for an A. And I don't care what point in your life you get this, whether you're sick, you're not, the sooner you do it, the better. Because when you start stringing a bunch of things together, like when you take some of Dr. Kruse's crazy ideas that you'll read about on my Patreon or other podcasts, you listen to me, and you start doing them yourself, and you start seeing they work.
Mm-hmm.
All I ask you, you know what your payment to me is?
Is to pay it forward and share it with people.
That's it. That's all I want you to do. You don't need to do anything else. That's part of the reason on my Patreon blog, people ask me, why is it behind a paywall? I said, because if I put it out live, the powers of being centralized medicine would want to lock me up and take my license away and everything else. So what do? I charge people literally the cost of a coffee a month to have the best medical textbook on decentralized medicine you'll ever do. Mm-hmm. You get my best ideas in written form. You may not understand a lot of it, but if you ask me questions, I answer them. And if you want more of my time, then you got to pay me a little bit more money, because then I'll give you time. Dan knows that. Dan's living the life of Riley right now. He's driving me around while we're doing all this, listening,
learning,
and also seeing us change and how we're changing the centralized paradigm, how we plan to do it. What things are we doing? Like some of the things that I'm working on, this neurosurgery thing is not just about taking care of patients. It's about sitting down with leaders in other countries, talking to them about informed consent and medical freedom laws.
Hi, friends. Tomorrow we're talking about learning to rethink. Lots more to come with Dr. Kruse. In the meantime, be nice people, make good choices, and be present.
This podcast and all related content published or distributed by or on behalf of Maria Menounos or mariamenounos.com is for informational purposes only and may include information that is general in nature and that is not specific to you. Any information or opinions expressed or contained herein are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice, nor to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any disease, condition, illness, or injury, and you should consult the healthcare professional of your choice regarding all matters concerning your health, including before beginning any exercise, weight loss, or healthcare program. If you have or suspect you may have a healthcare emergency, please contact a qualified healthcare professional for treatment. Any information or opinions provided by a guest expert or host featured within website or on company's podcast are their own, not those of Maria Menounos or the company. Accordingly, Maria Menounos and the company cannot be responsible for any results or consequences or actions you may take based on information or opinions.